Like, why would you do that to yourself? Hi, everyone. We're doing some mic check to make sure we are heard and that our sound is good. Okay. I don't think y'all can see us yet, but we'll give it another minute.
What day is it? Thursday. This week has gone by so fast. I'm in shock.
Yes, y'all, we are already halfway through Q1 in the world. Welcome, everyone. We hope that you are safe and warm and have grabbed some lunch or about to have lunch. Gotta nourish those bodies, y'all. But thank you for being here. Thank you for watching the replay. I am Kelly King Jackson.
And I'm Maria Fernandez.
And we are both coaches and consultants with nonprofits. I'm a leadership coach and do some strategic advising with nonprofits and foundations. I'm trying to help us have impactful strategy that really hits the goals and the improvements we want to see in our communities, particularly in the U.S. South.
Awesome, Kelly. And I do organizational strategy work, which includes a lot of organizational development, assessment, and strategy support, thinking about governance, our topic for today, and then some coaching, more capacity coaching to strengthen organizations, but on occasion, leadership development coaching, or if I feel someone's a good fit for Kelly, referring folks to Kelly because she's a wonderful, wonderful leadership coach as well.
Awesome. Yeah, so Maria and I, we've been working together on a project or two over the last year and have seen a lot of alignment, the intersection of leadership and governance. Maria is certified by BoardSource and spends a lot of time with boards, helping them think through their governance practices. And I spend a lot of time coaching senior leaders of organizations and hearing some of the challenges and opportunities that they're exploring. And so we thought it would be great to bring those two conversations together because we felt like it just doesn't happen enough. This is a conversation. So we're not training or, it's not a one-way exchange. We really want to hear from you. So whether you ask your questions live in the chat, and I'll be monitoring the chat on my phone, or if you post a question in the replay, we want to hear what your ideas are and what your questions are. We really acknowledge that, particularly in this moment of so much transition, that board chairs and executive directors are carrying so much. And they often don't have places to talk about what they're experiencing and trying to navigate openly. And that's why we're here today.
That's right, Kelly. You made me think about, to your point, that really being a board chair and being an executive director or CEO has so many similarities. They can sometimes feel like really lonely roles, right? As a board chair, you're really helping steward and motivate and engage this group of volunteers, people who have chosen because they're excited about the work to advance the mission of the organization. And you have the executive director who has a team that they're working with to help advance the mission of the organization too. So in a way, there's lots of similarities between them. But we'll talk a little bit too about some of the tensions that can happen there and how they can have some breakthroughs in resolving those.
Yeah. So y'all, we cuddled together and, or brainstormed around what were the things we were seeing in common, and kind of broke out into three big buckets that we're going to take a deep dive into. So the first one is around this role and power confusion. Sometimes, and I've had this situation where I'm working with the senior leader and they're being micromanaged by their board chair. The board chair is not in a governance stance. They are acting like a member of the team, and it leads to a lot of role confusion and power confusion. Like, who has the power in the decision making of the day to day, and that's a big pain point I've seen. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Maria, before I jump to the next one.
No, I mean that's really important, and I think one of the things that I think both of us really lean into in our work is naming the unnamed, kind of saying what's
Yes.
unsaid, and so some of the power dynamics is really key. So, encourage you in the chat or as you think about your own work, what are some of the conversations that go unsaid, and so that power dynamic is really um, is really key to be thinking about.
Yeah. One of the other under this kind of big bucket is around disengagement. So we have a lot of clients who post pandemic are really struggling with their boards. Some of their boards just kind of stopped true governance in the pandemic because they were just direct, rapid response, meeting the needs of community, trying to save people's lives. Who has time for a board meeting, and what would we possibly be talking about, right? We're all trying to get folks access to vaccination, trying to get folks safely housed, trying to get survivors of domestic violence into a safe place for their families. And so talking about bylaws and quite frankly, budgets, while the money was raining, right? Between the ARPA funds and funders who were trying to be responsive, you didn't really have to think about a lot of that, right? And so now that we are in our new normal, right, in kind of steady state, I use air quotes significantly when I say that, but trying to re-engage the board is becoming increasingly challenging for a lot of folks.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Another under this bucket is around rubber stamping. So I will admit that there were seasons of my board tenure where I was rubber stamping. I was over capacity and I wasn't communicating with the board chair. I mean, with the executive director. Sometimes it was family health and things that were happening. Sometimes my job was just taking over my free time. And so I would show up to the board meeting and my vote was always yes. Like, I didn't read the board book. I did not ask any questions. I was just rubber stamping. And that is the fastest way for an organization to go off the rails. You are there to be a guardrail and a sounding board and accountability partner with the executive director to ask the questions related to budget, to ask the question related to organizational capacity, to ask the questions about what does the funding landscape look like for us to undertake some of this work. And so I think sometimes we see organizations, because there's so much rubber stamping, the organization is moving in a direction and then everyone's like, how do we get here? And then also the executive director feels really alone, like they don't have the support that they need as they're trying to make important decisions.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Kelly. And there is also sometimes the sense of, as an executive director, I mean, I've heard this from executive leaders that I've coached, is like, to the point of those who experience some of the micromanagement, some of them are saying, I wish they could just back off. Like, leave me alone. I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to complain that I'm not getting questions, because sometimes I just need to do the work and I feel like overwhelmed by that. And so I think a big key to that is the consistency and the relationship, which we're going to talk about. Is you need consistency in the relationship. So if you're in one where you feel like, hey, that's great that they're hands off, it's going to be hard to get back into a rhythm to get real insights and support from them when you really do need their help, right? And vice versa.
Yeah. And rubber stamping, when you're trying to then re-engage a board, is also like, you can't even vote because you don't have quorum, right? So disengagement isn't just people like me who were just showing up and saying yes. It's also like missing a significant number of meetings. I know an organization, they could not get a vote passed for multiple months because they didn't have quorum.
Yeah.
So, yeah. The last one under this kind of umbrella of role and power confusion is around decision bottlenecks. I love a good SOP, right? Like, how are we going to make decisions about X, and thinking about that on the front end and not when the decision actually needs to be made. Sometimes there's too many chefs in the kitchen, right? Like, we often talk about, I talk about MOCA. I think, Maria, sometimes you talk about RACI, but this idea that there should be one owner, right? Yes, we may all touch the work in some ways, but when we don't have a clear owner of the work, it leads to decision bottlenecks, and the work is just stalled because there are just too many people in the kitchen.
I love that point, Kelly. And to me, and so in Spanish, we one phrase we use is muchas manos en la masa, too many hands in the masa when you're making tamales. Like people, and which is a great metaphor too, is that people have roles. There's the people who make the masa, the people who make the chili and the filling, the people who put it together, right? There's different roles. And when you got too many hands in there, and so, there's a lot of great resources out there for, what's the role of the board for free? What's the board role? What's the executive director role? And there is a gray area, some things that are kind of shared, but to your point, to the SOPs, to really like teasing it out is like, okay, so the budget piece, well, both groups have a hand in the budget piece, but there are very specific things that the executive director does and the board does that, and that might look different in your organization, but the main point is that you agree on what the distinction
on what it is. Yes, got to have that agreement. Anything else on kind of our first bucket that you want to lift up?
As I was thinking about it, the other piece, well, just one more that came up for me, Kelly, was around, which goes back again to the boards, to the roles and responsibilities, is kind of having really unrealistic expectations of each other. Okay. I mean, we can get deep there too. But the expectations that sometimes boards have of the executive director and what they're supposed to do, and also new executive directors and the onboarding. You have a founding board member that leaves, and you expect maybe some boards may expect a new executive director to be the same person who was giving 24/7 to that role. And so how does it look different as you're onboarding and bringing up a new executive director and being really clear on what the responsibilities of the new executive director are? And I think I shared with you, I have a friend and colleague, Shonda Kosser, who put an article at the Stanford Social Innovation Review about the Hollow Prize for leaders of color as executive directors, is that sometimes boards put really unrealistic expectations of them, not because, and how difficult it makes it, not because they're not brilliant and super qualified, but because you expected the same networks, you expected the same experience with the organization that someone coming new has than they have. And so both with the board, and then sometimes the unrealistic expectations that an ED might have of the board, right?
Oh, this is really juicy, because I've also heard from particularly from Black women, because that's primarily my audience, that they come in and they are now held to a much higher standard than the previous executive director, who wasn't a Black woman. And all of a sudden they're supposed to work magic, like the organization had not been meeting their fundraising goals, or they had been in a deficit, but they're expecting them to come in and clean up a lot of mess that the board, quite frankly, had been allowing to happen because they hadn't been having a loving and accountable relationship with the previous executive director. So there are some pretty toxic kind of trends we have seen as coaches. And it's something that I think we should talk about more openly. How do we want to be as a board as we're moving through this transition, right? What are the biases? The Management Center, I love their preferences, traditions, and requirements, right?
Yeah,
what are
PRT.
Our yes, I love it. Like, what are our preferences, right? Like, how do we prefer to be as a board? What are the traditions, the things we assume because it's just always been that way? And then truly, what are the requirements to get the job done? And having that level of clarity is super, super important to navigating some of this. Yeah.
Agreed.
Awesome.
Agreed.
Yeah. You want to start us out on our next kind of big umbrella topic?
Sure. I mean, as someone who's gotten in recent years more into strategic planning, the part of strategy without partnership is a big one.
Yeah.
Is starting to think about your strategic priorities and directions. And again, when sometimes what is hard to that boards may not, who are struggling, may not always really have, is a clear sense about their value, their role and their value and what they're there. And a huge part of the role of the board is to work in partnership with the executive director to set the strategic direction for the organization. So
Yeah.
for whatever reason, they might not have a strategic plan yet, but you got to have your priorities.
Yeah.
And your priorities is the message that you as a board, as an advocate, as a champion to the organization is giving out to the world about why they should care about the work that the organization is doing. And that message should be the same by the executive director. So
Yeah.
that is a huge one. And so some of the things that we see when you don't have that relationship and that partnership, and you may, I guess on the front end in a strategic plan is you don't have one because that's just not seen as a priority. So you don't invest in creating a strategic plan, but there's challenges that happen all along the way. I mean, you can decide as a board to then, go forward and engage in a strategic planning process. But then, it's not truly inclusive. It's not truly having the conversations that you need to have to make sure that that plan really reflects your priorities, that you surface the challenges, that surfaces, do you have the capacity to do the resources to do what you're saying you're going to put in the plan? And then on the tail end, the execution of it, right? So you may have a pretty plan in writing, but like I said, if you haven't had the hard conversations about the resources, the time, the people, the expertise you need to implement it, then that gets hard. And so often what I've seen in some of these strategic planning processes is that you have boards who they say, we all clap, the plan is done.
It's amazing. We finished.
Go make it happen. The CEO, executive director, go forth with your team. And then, what they expect back is the reporting, right? So let's check in, right? And that's great to have a system for accountability and sharing that. But when there's challenges or maybe some assumptions that you made don't work, we go back to the role of the board chair, right? How frequently is the board chair meeting and the executive director to, more than once a month, really to get into how is it going? What are the challenges? How we can kind of problem solve together. So
I would love.
What are you seeing or hearing?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I would love for folks to put in the chat, how often are your board chair and your ED meeting at your organization? I had a standing monthly meeting for the most recent board I was the chair of. One, I'm not a good chair. I don't like all the rules. So, but I knew that the executive director just needed some time to say, this is what's happening. Here's where I'm feeling stuck. And it was my job to figure out, does she just need support, or ask that, do you need support? Do you need a resource? How can I be helpful in this moment? And to not leave her out kind of floundering. And I do agree, plans often stall because everyone's eye is not on the same ball, right? I've seen boards completely derail a strategy because their friend is on another board at another organization. And they're like, hey, why aren't we doing this thing? And the ED feels pressure, right, to show up for this new way because this board chair, who may be writing a lot of checks, is saying, I'm interested in this other thing. I've seen some board chairs do some really wild things and really undermine the plan that was set out. The main reason I don't do strategic plans is because so many people don't use them, right? They go through this lengthy process for many, and then it sits on a shelf or sits in an email, but isn't actually used to guide individual work plans, board work plans, where everyone is accountable for what is their contribution to the plan actually being successful. And to your point about resources, getting real with the board, saying we have a list of 20 priorities. We need to whittle that down to the top 3 to 5, right? Someone told me the other day, I don't know the origination of this, but you can do one thing superbly well, and you can do 5 things okay, right? And so they were encouraging people to think about goals in that way. You should not have more than 5 goals, right? Stick to the 1 to 3 kind of range if you can, but 3 to 5 for many, because they have so many things that they want to be doing, because we want to do our work well. And yes, the need of the community is that you're trying to serve are great, but it doesn't mean you have to meet all those needs. And how your board can help ask the tough questions about, do we have the resources? Or we're willing to raise the resources, right?
Mhm.
Or we aren't that type of board, right? We're a board of folks with lived experience and don't have the exhaustive social networks. And so our board kind of roles and responsibilities are really rooted in us being aligned to the community and us being aligned to meeting and centering those needs. But that means you may not have the resources needed to even get to 5 of those goals. And it's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay to say we are a small team and we are laser focused on this one audacious goal. Edgar Villanueva, his new goal is his moonshot goals, he calls it,
Yeah.
is to raise I think he said $1 billion. He's trying to raise $1 billion
Wow.
for decolonizing philanthropy and moving resources back to indigenous and other communities of color.
Mm.
Amazing, audacious goal. Everything they're doing is toward that one thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely, like the goals, you need to have the capacity underneath them. You got your destination where you want to get to, but you need to have all the things working in the car to make it happen. And so if you're, yeah, for sure. That's a big one. So, and again, that strategic plan, that's your sandbox. Like you said, that's the thing that decides, that's your container that decides, what you're going to pursue or not. So you don't get derailed. So you don't do the mission creep. Right. So that is a key piece, that you keep each other accountable for it, because there's external pressures. There's, sometimes right now in this funding challenge, some of them aren't even negative pressures. Some of them are enticing things like funding opportunities, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
If you're not aligned in that way with your board, it gives you that bolstering to make hard decisions about, are you going to pursue this grant that kind of is feeling a little tangential and that you might regret it later. So those are real tensions and challenges that organizations faces, but having your clear, not that you can't make adjustments and be responsive in real time, but you need kind of your big, like you said, your big rails to move forward.
Super, super important. I mean, as a former funder, I'm sure, and Maria, you've seen this, right? Organizations applying for resources that have nothing to do with their strategic plan, right? And they're trying to make a square fit into a circle, right? And we know you need the resources. Like, we are empathetic to that. And just like your organization has priorities, this foundation has set a priority. Whether you agree with it or not, that is their priority. And it's okay to say something's not a good fit, right? That it's going to move us in a direction we actually don't want to go. I just heard a client I've been working with say, we got into the civic engagement space. That has nothing to do with our priorities, right? A funder asked them to do some work in the space. So it came with resources. So that was great. But also the core of their work wasn't being tended to while they were off doing this other thing. So
yeah. I see a response to your question, Kelly. If I look, I'm looking to my other screen. Thank you for joining us, Tabitha. You mentioned, as a chair, I typically meet weekly with the ED. It can help the ED maintain priorities and stay on track. Being an ED can be lonely without proper support. Absolutely.
Wow. What an amazing board chair. I was never that good of a board chair.
Thank you for joining and sharing your insights. And really, I mean, I think the most effective ones that I've seen, it's more than once a week. And sometimes, I hear from executive directors, well, maybe less executive directors, but in these conversations, a board chair, I did a facilitation with at a conference for board chairs, and how they can more effectively support their EDs. And one of them says, well, like, I always make myself available. I'm available by text, I'm available by phone. They can always reach me. Great. And you need a time, you need consistency. And so one of the greatest roles that a board chair can be is what I'm seeing from you, Tabitha, is being a coach. To be a coach, to be an encourager. And to your point, Kelly, just like, what do you need from me today? Is it problem solving? Is it just listening, right? Is it understanding? Is it, so there may be different things, but you don't know. And one of the things that I suggest, again, for the board chair executive director relationship is having that culture of no surprises, right?
Ooh.
What is most awful than to come into a meeting as an executive director and feel, I'm going to be real, feel ambushed by your board because something
Yeah.
can happen that you didn't know. Or on the other side, for an executive director, CEO to come into a meeting and drop some
The bomb.
serious
Yeah.
news about something, right?
Mhm.
So there's always going to, again, we're in a very changing climate. Not
Yeah.
everything is predictable, but to have that kind of consistency, Tabitha, that you have with your ED, it's you can anticipate more. You can kind of see something
Absolutely.
coming down and problem solving.
Mhm.
Maybe you can't solve everything, but you can mitigate some of it in advance, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. I love one of the things I did for the ED when I was the board chair was like I just created our template for our agenda. And I was like, let's commit to, documenting questions as they come up in this one place to
Mhm.
also help prepare for the meeting, right? Like just showing up, hey, let's check in, helpful, but also like giving some context. It just helps everyone. And then having the standing meetings also, whatever your cadence, also holds each of these leaders accountable for their role in moving this work forward, right? I tell people I have an accountability group. We meet every Friday at 1 p.m. Central. One thing I'm not going to do is show up and not have done shit, right? So whether it's
Yes.
Thursday night, I'm trying to get something done so I have a report update to provide, but I'm not going to come and be like, I didn't do anything.
Yes.
And so that level of accountability also allows people, even if it's not the depth and breadth of what they wanted to do, to be accountable to getting something done. So yeah.
100%, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
We have kind of one more big bucket, Kelly, if you want to start us off. And then if you're joining us, would love to hear, we talked a little bit about kind of the role and power confusion as a big tension and challenge. We talked about strategy without partnership. And so if you have any other kind of tensions or challenges that you're seeing, hearing, experiencing in your work, feel free to drop it in the comments.
Yeah. So our third bucket is around avoiding accountability. So I'll run through a few of the points that both came up from Marie and I. The first that I'm a stickler for as a leadership coach is that the ED has no assessment process. The ED is not getting tangible feedback about what is working in their leadership and what they can be striving toward. Saying you did a good job is not feedback, right? Giving them specifics so that they can continue to improve their leadership. We just see way too many boards who aren't doing that. One of the boards I was on, I rolled off last year. Our process was to survey the entire board, about the executive director, the entire staff. And then the board chair and the ED collaborated to come up with a short list of external partners. So we were really interested in, and they did their own self-reflection, right? So how are they feeling in their leadership? How is the staff and board experiencing their leadership? But then how is the community experiencing their leadership? And it was a really wonderful and powerful exercise, similar to a 360, if you will, but with, to me, more space for more nuance and more practical examples and realistic understanding of the actual work that's being done. So not having an assessment process is a big red flag and an avoidance of accountability. It's something that the board and the board chair should really prioritize, happening annually, if not biannually. Not doing succession planning. So one thing that seems to always get kicked to the end of the road, right? Kick that can as far as you can kick it, is around not doing succession planning. I think that we've made succession planning feel like strategic planning, that it has to take a year for us to figure it out. And even if it is if I drop dead tomorrow, or if I go into the hospital tomorrow, here's what will happen. And having some clarity about how the board will step up to provide space and capacity. And then hopefully how the staff will also step up to provide space and capacity, that there is a Bible of sorts about what the ED is involved in, what work are they holding. I tell people all the time, you can voice memo it right now. Here's what I do on a given week, right? Or to even voice memo for a week, Monday through Friday. Some of y'all working Saturday and Sunday. Let's tell the truth, shame the devil, right? Voice memo what you did for the day at the end of the day. Use your AI to summarize that and to come up with, here's a memo about the role that I'm in. So anyone who has to step in and fill my shoes, this is the type of thing you can expect to fall onto your plate. There's technology like Scribe, where you can click through and it will make pretty PDFs. The technology is there to support us, that we don't have to come up with something so exhaustive that, again, it's never utilized, but that is practical and true to the actual work that will need to be held. We see a lot of board chairs now who are stepping in as interim. That's a very common thing, I think, that has been happening. We also see staff who have not been invested in. They haven't had a fellowship. They haven't had a coach, who are now asked to be an interim ED, and it is chaotic. They are avoidant. They don't know how to manage people because they haven't been given the opportunity to have that experience and that practice. And it does a disservice to everyone. And so when you actually start either a replacement process where someone's going to come in, or the ED returns from whatever leave they took, they're coming into a dumpster fire, right? And so how are you also thinking about your pipeline? There's nothing that grieves me more than seeing senior leaders who have no successor identified, and they've been in their role 15 years, 25 years, right? And it is a big pain point we have in the sector for sure.
Yeah.
Nope. I hate a national search. I'm like, well, what have you been doing with the people in your organization? Just because philanthropy wants you to do a national search, who better, right? Yes, sometimes you're too close to the work, but also you know the work. And with the proper supports, right, people can really thrive, and organizations don't have to start from scratch and somebody come in and make a whole new priority. And really to, hold the tension of, is that the right strategy and approach for us? So that accountability piece is around succession planning really stood out for us.
Yeah. And Kelly, one of the such good points, one of the best places to start, if you haven't started the sustainability planning process, is at the beginning of a new hire. So it's not, sometimes folks avoid it because they're thinking, well, I'm not trying to give a hint that, we want to get rid of the ED, or the ED is like, is this a sign? Like, should I be worried? Right. And so at the beginning, it's part of, it's good practice. And like you said, it's a succession plan for the ED, and also succession plan for the board chair.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've seen with boards is you have the chair and then you have the vice chair, and often the experience ranges. It's often from the board chair does everything, and the vice chair just like, well, I guess I'll stay out of the way. But that in itself is an opportunity for partnership and mentoring and coaching, and making really good use of the vice chair role. And then, just one other thought to your point around the investing internally. When we talk about sustainability planning, it's also, like you said, key leadership. And I'm going to be real in this chat again too. When we talk about, in the past probably 5 years, having a shift and a turn in predominantly white leadership in nonprofit spaces to leaders of color and Black and brown leaders, and saying, well, we don't have the right people. One, they exist. And two is, a lot of the times you do have the folks who are most closely connected with the work and have lived experiences there that promote the work you're doing, in a lot of the work that you're doing, that are there and that have not been invested in, like you say, have not had the leadership opportunity. So thinking about what are the key roles in addition to the ED, what's the succession plan there, and what role do they play in supporting and leading the organization? So I love that.
Yeah, thank you for that. I actually was working with the organization who said they had identified a successor, but they actually weren't doing the mentorship and really starting to share power so that the transition could actually happen. And they left. And I'm seeing that a lot of leaders who are like, I'm not going to keep waiting my turn. I can go somewhere else who sees my potential and sees that I'm ready. And so, just a word of, y'all seen my Am I the Drama posts and to ask yourself the question, right? Like, am I hampering progress in my organization because I have leaders who could be my successor, but I'm not giving them the opportunity to lead? And we lose a lot of good talent that way. So, my next favorite is difficult conversations. In the avoidance, right? Like nonprofits, we don't like conflict. We don't like discomfort. We have a nice culture, which I don't believe nice is always or often kind, right? We're saying the right thing, but we mean something else. And so we have to be able to build the tool set of both the the leadership on the board and of the staff to be able to say the hard things, right? To say, we've been over budget for 6 months, we need to have a conversation. Or to say, we have a policy about this and we have consistently not followed that policy. And I think we need to add that to the next board agenda. Or to say to your board, we've only had 40% participation for the past 3 board meetings. We need to have a conversation about, is this working for you? Or if you need to step away, right? Like those are some really important conversations that if we had them earlier, we would avoid so much pain and chaos. But because we don't want to say the hard thing, we don't want to hurt people's feelings, we don't want to intrude, we avoid them and we actually make the challenges much, much worse. Yeah.
And to that, Kelly, like underneath that, all the examples that you give it is fear, right?
Yes.
Fear of naming something we can't solve, fear of hurting someone's feelings, fear of not being liked, fear. A lot of them are driven by fear of fear of not having the answer, fear of not having the resources. And so at its worst, I mean, that can lead to secrecy, right? And lack of transparency and people not being as candid or honest. So at its worst, then you see issues that then end up in the headlines, which is unethical behavior and potentially illegal behavior, right? That happens. So again, those things can really fester, and it all goes back to the culture that's created within the board, within the organization. And many times it's the mirror of how those are working together.
Yeah, absolutely. We really touched on board member disengagement already. I think the last thing I would say around avoiding accountability is around fundraising plans that are built around aspiration instead of capacity. What do we actually have the capacity to hold in terms of raising resources for this organization? Both from the staff and the board have been trained on fundraising to we've mapped our network. We have a sense of, we've done the donor prospecting to know like who our ideal donors and funders are and have started to cultivate those relationships. That takes time.
Yeah.
And I think one of the chief complaints we hear from funders is, well, this nonprofit, they don't answer my email, or I don't even know what's happening with that organization. That just those 2 things alone can really hurt your opportunity to raise more resources. And so being realistic, how many partners can you hold as a leader? And it's going to be different from everyone, right? How much additional support do you need from staff, a development director, a development consultant, your board chair, your board fundraising committee? How much additional support do you need those folks to bring for you to really hold the types of relationships that y'all want to have with your donors?
Yeah. Which goes back to, again, the role and the importance of the board is that board is there to add value, to add expertise, to add perspectives, to complement your strengths. And so when it's feeling to an executive director like you're putting in more than it's benefiting the organization, that gets really hard.
If there are other questions about or things that are resonating with folks, we would love to hear what those are. What tensions or challenges have been coming up for you in your board executive director relationship? Definitely want to hear some of those. We'll go back into the chat for folks who watch the replay and see some of what you share. And if we have resources, we're happy to share those in the comments as well. Yes.
For sure.
Awesome. I would love for us to talk about like excitement, energy for future. So one of the things I'm super excited about in the board space in particular is like, how do we start to reimagine boards? I see so many folks have, who they default to Robert's Rules of Order. They don't understand it. It's actually not a governance structure that aligns with who they are as an organization. It doesn't align with their values. It's not equitable or inclusive or to make sure that more voices are heard. And so I watch people feel very intimidated because I make a motion and I second the motion, and is there some discussion? It's too much. I used to have a cheat sheet because I was like, I'm not going to remember this because I don't even think in this way. And we never had a conversation about, is there another governance model that would make sense for us? Mm-hmm. And so I know GEO Grantmakers for Effective Organizations is having some conversations with philanthropy about this. I know there are a bunch of consultants who are trying to think through this. I have seen some boards who do a simple fist to 5.
I was going to say fist to 5 is a perfectly fine decision-making tool, Kelly. Yes.
And it's simple and it's clear, right? The other favorite, I'm a part of an alliance here in Houston called Black Impact Houston. And they use a governance model I'd never heard of called sociocracy. And they use this phrase, I always mess it up, but I'll give you the essence. And it basically is it good enough? Is it good enough for now? Is it safe enough to try? So they ask the question, is it good enough for now? Is it safe enough to try? And then they want to hear from all the members, right? What about this feels good enough for you or not? What about this feels safe to try or not? With the understanding, we can change our minds, right? Like just because we start down one path, we don't have to stay on that path because we made that decision. Like that's why you update bylaws, right? That's why you update your strategy, do a strategy refresh. And so getting enough voices so that you can really hear where are people having concerns, where are they feeling reservation or uncertain, and being able to have a full comprehensive discussion before making a decision. It's just a beautiful thing to watch because it's always interesting to hear from people who would normally not speak up to talk about, well, here's what doesn't feel good to me. And with some dialogue may get to a place where they're like, yeah, it's good enough for now for me. I can vote yes on it.
Yeah. Can we sit with this decision-making piece a little bit, Kelly? Because I love everything that you brought up there around it. The decision-making is one of the biggest pain points. And I guess I hate to harp back and go back to decision-making again to clear roles because, sometimes you may attend a board meeting and you're not, it's really interesting to see how the executive director, the CEO shows up there and how the board chair shows up. Right? Because you may come in where sometimes you're like, oh, you're the board chair. They're like, oh no, I'm the CEO. And the CEO is running the board meeting like it's a staff meeting, right? A team meeting. And then conversely, you may also see examples where the board chair is completely disengaging. I had a conversation yesterday with a good consultant friend and was talking about their work with CEOs and how sometimes boards may have conversations where it's kind of like the CEOs, the EDs are kind of at the kids' table, right? Where don't worry about this. We're gonna big kids. We're gonna figure it out. So I mean, there's all in between, but at its extremes, we see some of those things happen. So anyway, all that to say is that there's the big piece we were talking about roles, and the decision making is a really key one where if you don't have the clear information and you don't have clear roles around that, the decision making can get hard. And it goes back to all the things we said too about the strategic planning. You don't have clear priorities in your roadmap. You can go all over the place. But similar to the process that you shared, there's also, I was like, you can do fist to 5, to get a pulse check of how folks are feeling. especially some of the work that I do with coalitions and, grassroots organizations.
Mhm.
We need to get trained on like Robert's Rules of Orders. I'm like, you can do whatever you want. I mean, I put it in my reminder message is like the requirements that the IRS has for how boards are supposed to run. When we were happy to share that there's resources out there and happy to share kind of the list, right? Like
Yeah.
it's very minimal. There is so much opportunity and creativity to really
Yeah.
shape a governance structure that's going to work for you.
Mhm.
So there's lots of ways that you can decide to make decisions. So
Yeah.
that's just a big one. And so the one of the ones that I've had a colleague share with me is kind of the proposal-based decision making, which is similar to that. Is that you come up with you bring a proposal to the table, and then you do kind of that pulse check is like, so I support, I'm not sure, and I don't support. And so the question that they engage is the folks who have that is like, well, what questions do you have? What would make that a yes?
Yeah.
And the ones that don't is what would make that a yes. And it's very much in line with what you talk about, is that sometimes these processes and systems that have been set up around majority rule and like often leave the voices out of the folks that we sometimes need to hear with the most. So it really, if that's part of your culture, and I would encourage that for all organizations to really be inclusive and to really hear, all the voices and hear multiple voices, is how can you create decision-making processes that really that we listen and pay attention to the folks, and it's not just majority. So there's winners and losers.
Who got the power?
A lot of these structures never were intended to serve some of the nonprofits that exist and continue not to. So I love your point. It's just, I'm saying the same thing, Kelly, but how much flexibility there is for you to shape it, something that feels right and that's going to be effective and that's going to maximize the strengths and the contributions of everyone on your board.
Yeah. Because no shade, but Robert, you're not from Oakland, or Robert, you're not from Sunnyside in Houston. Like, you don't know about San Antonio, Robert.
If it's working for you, go at it. And that does not have to be the way. There's so much opportunity, and we think board governance boring, but there's that's why I enjoy doing that work. Is there's so many ways you get people in a room and you really make the time to think through it. What's working, what's not, what can be different, what do you want to be different, and you can get really creative to work with the rhythms of that that you want to set for working together.
I love that.
Yeah.
I hope to see more people like really say, no, we don't need 25 board members. Here's what our organization needs, right? We need these key 5, and then we're going to work committees for the rest of the work that meet once a quarter, right? Like, how do we get realistic about the types of capacity to even hold a board of that size, versus to have people who have the time and capacity to support the work and really help make sure we're getting shit done. That would make me very, very happy. And no, I don't want to be on your board.
Well, maybe this is a plug. I know folks follow, so like Nonprofit AF, I know Vu talks about this. It's really the exploring just non-traditional, conventional ways of shared governance and what that looks like. And so if there's a board, there's requirements around, your financials, reporting and setting the compensation, submitting your 990s. I mean, there are specific legally mandated things that the board should do. And then there is a lot of flexibility. And so there's a lot of folks really trying new and innovative ways of doing governance together.
Yeah. Awesome. So before we wrap up, we thought we would just talk a little bit about, when things are working well together, like what things do we see as coaches and consultants? So one, I think the most important is we see trust, right? We see a board chair who can say, my staff really messed up. Like, I really need someone to talk through this. Like, I need to know, do I need to take this to HR? How do I do this? Right. And to be clear, and not violating HR policy, right? But to say, I just need a thought partner and someone to help me know which path I should pursue to get to the right support that I need. That they trust each other to say that, they'll give each other the heads up. And vice versa, a board chair to say, hey, look, I'm hearing some grumbling from the other board members. Here's what I think is happening. Here's how we can work together to address it. But that they trust each other enough to say the hard things and the messy things that happen because we're humans leading work. And that trust leads to transparency, right? That we can be honest with each other. I can tell you, look, I have a lot happening in my family right now. I'm not going to be the best board chair the next couple of months, but here's what I'm thinking. I've asked, whoever to help step in and cover some of this so that you continue to have the support you need instead of avoiding it. Like, we can be honest and transparent with each other because we trust each other. The other is that we have shared vision for the work, right? Like, we know what our North Star is, and we are clear that we are moving on the same path to get to that North Star. And that brings also energy. Like, alignment brings energy into conversation and into relationship. That folks are flexible and resilient in their leadership, right? Like, just because I did it one way this last time doesn't mean that's going to be the right way to do it this time in this context with this group of humans, and being okay that I have to make some changes or we have to try something different. What we're doing isn't working. That level of flexibility is what builds our resilience as leaders. And when we see that happen, both at the board chair and at the ED level, it really bodes well for a healthy, functional nonprofit organization. Modeling this relationship for the rest of the staff, right? A lot of nonprofit staff see very toxic board and staff relationship, but to see a healthy one also models to other staff of how they can be collaborating more closely with the executive director or with the other directors of other departments. Because your communication is clear, they see you walking lockstep with each other. So really teachable moment, opportunity for when a board chair and a senior leader are working well together. And then, quite frankly, y'all's messaging is the same. Your board chair not out here talking about you do X, Y, and Z when you do ABC, right? Like, when you are aligned, everyone is, what is it? We sing in the same song, right? We got different notes, but we singing in the same song, same key. One something, one band. Like, I don't know all the different sayings, but you get my drift, right? Like, we're all the old people say we all marching to the same song, same drum.
Yes.
And that really is important, especially when things start to get hard. That you're able to do the shifting and the leveraging that are necessary to continue the good work.
Yeah.
Would you add anything?
One last thing, 100% on everything you shared, Kelly. One last thing, maybe goes without saying, but just like retention. Like, you want to think about retention strategy?
Yes.
Really, like, this is a good board chair. It's not overstating it, y'all. Like, one of the biggest, like, predictors, contributors to a thriving organization is going to be an effective board chair, executive director, CEO relationship. So,
yeah,
you're seeing a lot of turnover in the executive director. It goes there. It goes there. To what degree do they feel supported? What degree do they feel they have a partner in problem solving? Do they feel they have the supports they need? Do they feel that they're getting praise and positive feedback in addition to the challenging feedback? Like, I wasn't a facilitator. In one-on-one conversations and coaching, when was the last time your board chair or someone on your board said something positive about your work? Right? Like, the evaluation time should not be the first time folks are hearing what great job you did, or what the challenge is. So,
and some people have never heard any feedback, and so back to our earlier point, like, if you haven't given your ED any feedback, we can start now. It's February, but we can still look back to 2025 and say, let's have a conversation, because I want to share some things and get some insight from you. And make it a conversation maybe the first time, and then set up your process and move the work forward so that for 2026, you actually have a formal process.
Yes, like that's a great idea. That's a great idea because it helps break through some of the initial uncomfortable, what do we, kind of hard
Yeah.
conversations around accountability. And
Mm-hmm.
I love how you talk about it, Kelly, like the love and accountability there.
Yeah.
Because I've had conversations sometimes with EDs and they haven't had a raise in 3, 4 years. And so I
Yeah.
say, you know, eh, I said, well, how's that going for you? Well, that's not great. And then, you also have EDs who say, well, that's more on me
The
to
way it
fundraise for
is.
my own role. So why am I going to do that? But to the point of what is that purpose of that shared accountability is that at the end of
Yeah.
the day, where there's a performance increase or not, one of a valid reason to again really prioritize the performance review is that that's what you tie merit
Mm-hmm.
salary increase compensation to, right?
Yeah.
Be able to benchmark and tie your compensation to the performance. So
Yes.
that's one big reason why it would be important to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But also it doesn't that may be a harder conversation. You're like, we're not even in a position to have any raises. Why am I
Yeah.
doing this now? But I love that idea, Kelly, is like you could start with start with more frequent, 2 by 2,
Yeah.
quarterly conversations and how things are going. What are two strengths? What are two areas for me and for you? So that feedback is mutual as well.
Absolutely.
And so we
Yes.
could start there and then say, we're not even gonna talk about compensation for the first year.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the informal year 1 or 6 months and say, well, now we're gonna work towards creating a process. Okay, what does that process
Yeah.
look like? What are the goals in the strategic plan that this performance is being tied to? And you build it in, and then you can have conversation about
I love that.
compensation or benefits, and the compensation is separate too from other supports, right? Like
Yes.
professional development,
Yes.
flexible, whatever it is that enhances and facilitates and supports the ED to do their best work.
Mm-hmm. And too many EDs, quite frankly, are funding their professional development out of their own salary. And I think as board, even if your intent is an aspiration, we can't do it right now. Starting to have the conversation like this is what we aspire to provide. I'm helping a client really start to think through how are they going to start to message to their funders why their budget is going to increase the way it's going to increase because they need to get their salary to a living wage in order to have staff sustainability and retention, right? You cannot keep staff in today's market paying them $23,000 a year. It's not affordable in any city at this point in the United States. And so being realistic with our funders and no longer saying it only costs X amount of dollars to do this work, right? Because that's a very charity minded framework, and you all have built a whole sector. The nonprofit industrial complex is its own industry. The data around the number of jobs in your community that are provided by nonprofits is something that not enough people know about. But starting to talk to your board about how they can help to champion that, getting connected. It's usually your United Way who does the regional salary surveys. And if you participate in the salary surveys, they will typically give you the results for free. And so if you don't have access to other, data points to even know what should we be paying our executive director, that's one way to find that out. You can also look at candid.org's foundation
Directory online, yeah.
directory online to look at 990s of similar organizations to see what they're paying their folks. To give you some benchmark in my community, this is what other executive directors make. And you and your board chair starting to have some conversations about, what's the path to getting you towards that living wage salary.
Yeah. Love that.
Awesome. Really quickly, some things that we've seen help. We've mentioned today, we've talked about coaching. Both Marie and I coach executive directors and board chairs. We do that individually, and we can do that together in a dyad. Having those clear agreements, super, super helpful. Talking realistically in real time about capacity, proper onboarding. I would say even for a new board chair coming into an organization, onboarding the executive director about how you work. What is your style, your approach? So that you all get to know each other's work styles and preferences. And then really designing your meetings together so that that time together is fruitful, and having the, in the weeds as needed, but high level conversations about where the organization is going feels really important. Awesome.
Yeah.
This has been a great conversation, Maria.
Yes, likewise. We talk a lot, and we've known each other for a little more than better part of over a year. Now, Kelly,
Yes.
it's been so great to work with you, and it was great to bring up some ideas and thoughts that we hadn't talked about before. We kind of had some ideas of what we wanted to share and think about together, but we did a little dive into some organizational development, a little dive into strategic planning, even team staff engagement, right? There's all these things are so interconnected. And so we'd love to, if you see this recording later, welcome your messages for, resources. I'm a member of BoardSource as a consultant. So there's a lot of free tools. There's some things that are paid, but a lot of them are free. Yeah. That's a great resource. Kelly, you talked about Candid in terms of fund development. Then Council of Nonprofits also puts out some really great resources for nonprofits there. So there's, if you haven't signed up to want to get a good laugh, I think it's weekly, and some real good insights, kind of outside the box thinking. Nonprofit AF is a great blog that you just were like, you can so relate to it. And also get some practical insights and thoughts. It's like, no, I'm not imagining this is what's happening, this upside down situation. This is real. And so we want to, we want to continue to be a resource in the space and a learner from what's working for you. We also want to know what's working for you, because that helps build, our field and on our profit sector when people are doing something that's working. So we'd be excited to think with you about what that could look like. So happy to kind of get your thoughts on that as well, and what you would find helpful in the space.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. We look forward to checking out the comments and staying connected. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.